Okay. Hey, come on in. How you doing?
Okay, how are you?
Good. We just getting ready to get started. Make yourself comfortable. All right. Good afternoon. And welcome to our Black History Celebration. I'm Ed Reed. I'm one of your town commissioners, serving as the vice president. And we are excited to have you here. Also, just want to recognize some of our special guests, and all of you are special guests, but we have our former president of the county council, Andrew Friedson, who's one of our council members. Andrew has been a true champion for Poolesville in the western part of Montgomery County. And he still is a true champion. I also want to recognize my fellow commissioners. We have President Jim Brown. All right, we have Sarah Bashima. And so once again, we wanted to do something in recognizing Black History Month here in the town of Poolesville. While it might not be the same thing all over the country, but we still wanted to make sure that in our town that we're recognizing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so Link Hoeing, president of our Fair Access Committee, he's going to be our moderator. And our panelists, we have Skip Etheridge, we have Troy Gardner, and Chuck Copeland. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Link.
Now you can't hear the speakers, but the live stream you can. So if the audience, when we get finished with the presentations, has questions, please come up to this mic and ask your questions so that the people on the YouTube stream can hear it. And we'll have to repeat it maybe internally because you're speaking this way, but that's the only downside we've had today. Everything else is working, I think. So thank you for being here. Thank you for celebrating with us. Thank you, Andrew, for coming especially. We had Lorianne Sales came out last night to a movie we had that the Poolesville seniors had called The Butler, which is a very interesting movie about, essentially a lot of it was about civil rights history. It was very well done, and we had a great experience that evening too. So thank you for the speakers for coming today. The topic essentially is celebrating the role of Black American communities in our area. It's a history that is rich in accomplishments and contributions to the growth and success of our area. And we're going to look today at some of these areas in particular, but also some of the leaders who made a difference in our community, Black leaders in our community, and the historical remains of some of these communities. There's quite a bit to see in the area around Poolesville and some of these Black communities, and many may not know that. So some of that we're going to talk about today as well. The Western County, as we all know, consists of open spaces, streams, hardwood forest, and historically the economy of the county has predominantly been dominated by agriculture with small crossroads towns. The early white culture was Southern in character in the early days, and in fact during the Civil War, many Confederate sympathizing white residents crossed the Potomac to fight for the Confederacy. Since the 18th century, enslaved Black workers, along with free labor, hand-tilled the land, and most lived on small farms with 9 or less slaves. Bondsmen on nearby farms also worked the area. The most famous was Josiah Henson, the runaway slave upon whose autobiography Harriet Beecher Stowe based her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. Free Blacks comprised more than a fourth of the Black population by 1860 in our area and had founded communities well before the Civil War, including Big Woods. You all should have in front of you a map that was done by one of our great local historians here, Ralph Douglas. And it's got all of the African-American communities in Montgomery County, including those in what we call the Western County, was this section here around Poolesville. It's also sometimes called the Medley District. It is pretty much the same area. And District 2, which is Council Member Marilyn Balcom's district. All those are kind of the same area. According to excellent research by Ralph Douglas, he estimates that slightly more than half the landowners in the Medley District held enslaved people. According to his research, the 1860 census lists 319 dwelling units in Medley, nearly all farms, and 173 slave owners, or 54% of the landowners. Countywide at the time, the corresponding percentage was exactly half, 27%. So slavery was far more prevalent in Medley than in the rest of the county. But
did Ralph count slave dwellings at the time?
No.
Because that's all available too.
Yeah, he did not. It was not. You're exactly right. But slavery did not define the legacy of Blacks in our area. They established many thriving communities in and around Poolesville before and after the Civil War. Their names include Martinsburg, Big Woods, Mount Ephraim, Jerusalem, Jonesville, Sugar Land, and Boyd's White Grounds. In most cases, few people still live there, but they are still remembrances of a time of rich history and a heritage that is very important to remember. One thing to keep in mind, too, and I just wanted to kind of point this out before I close, is that a lot of these areas, again, as I said, have things that you can see today, and they're really worth going and visiting. And a big example, I'm sure that we're going to hear a little bit about that today from Chuck in particular, is Martinsburg, outside Poolesville. It includes the old Warren Church, a former schoolhouse, and a benevolent hall or community hall. And these three buildings were the primary establishments in most black settlements, and they only remain in one place in Maryland today, and that's in Martinsburg. So we have an incredible rare gem here in our area. That's remarkable. A pre-Civil War log cabin that once stood in Jonesville, again, another one of the African American communities, is actually at the African American History Museum now in Washington. And a former Rosenwald school remains intact today in Jerusalem. If you know about Rosenwald schools, they were established in 5,000 of them in southern cities, areas mostly, although Maryland was one of them. And this is one of the best examples of a Rosenwald school because they had these huge 8-foot-high windows to let in light. They didn't have electricity. Most of them today, except this one, do not have those windows. We will talk about all these things and how the history and contributions of these communities remain an important part of our legacy in Poolesville. And now let me turn to the panel and start with Skip Etheridge. Skip?
Yep. Okay. Hey, thank you all for being here. This is a my voice carries.
Yeah, but it's got to get on the YouTube. I
Oh,
want
okay.
you on YouTube.
Let me know when you're ready for me to put your slides up.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you know. It is my pleasure to be here. I've done a lot of different talks about Sugar Land in particular, but when I was asked to be here today, it's just a special privilege. You can go to any small town in our country, just any small town, and the residents of the town will talk to you about how special their town really is. It's a special town. I'm here, wherever it is, Oklahoma, wherever. But if you are here in Poolesville, or if you're an inhabitant of Poolesville, this is a very, very special town. You can hit the slide. I just like a 10-minute slide thing, but it is important to understand that most people who come to Poolesville, who come to visit Poolesville or come to live to Poolesville, they have no clue as to the historical significance of it. Go to the next one, please.
Next one, Ed.
Yeah, got you.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Ed?
We're moving in.
There, he did it.
There, he did it. Okay, but there's one person in particular in history that really thought that Poolesville was very important. Next slide. And I think that that's who he is, Abraham Lincoln. He thought Poolesville was a very, very strategic place. And why? Because, next slide,
Got you. I'm going to give you a clicker.
White's Ferry. Those people. Okay.
Yeah.
Kathy and my wife and Dave. But anyway, that White's Ferry was congruent to the nation's capital as far as he was concerned. So he sent his troops. He sent thousands out here to Poolesville. Abraham Lincoln, he knew Poolesville was important, so he sent his troops. And they were not happy because, like Link said, it was Confederate leading out here, and they weren't happy that the young Union soldiers were stealing the chickens and whatnot. But anyway, they were camped out here because he knew that the Confederate general, Robert E. Lee, and his cavalry, they could come through White's Ferry on horseback and be in Washington, D.C. in about 2 or 3 days. So he had an encampment out here in Poolesville because he thought Poolesville was important. But it's more important than that. It was important. You can go to the next slide. There's the communities in Poolesville, and in particular, Sugar Land is where my family I still live there, and my family established schools and churches there. The Taylors established a church in Sugar Land, and it still stands as a monument. You can go to the next slide, please. And the thriving six communities, of course, and Link has alluded to them. You can go to the next one, please. Those are again, most people who live here now and who come here to live, who pass through, they have no idea that these communities were there. They were established by free slaves, landowning freed slaves, and they contributed to the economy here in Poolesville, because Poolesville only had, several hundred inhabitants. Anyway, the farmers, they traded goods and services and so forth. But more than that, go ahead. We talk about Jerusalem. You can keep going on that one. Jonesville. If you've been down to the Museum of African American History and Culture, you will find that there is 2 or 3 plaques on the 3rd floor talking about Poolesville and those communities. Sugar Land, Jonesville, as Link mentioned, they have the house reconstructed. You can keep going. There is the Jones Hall Simmons house, and the reason why they took it apart and put it back together in the museum is because it had a second floor, had a second story, and in those days that was significant in the African American communities. If you had a second floor, okay, go. That's a picture of them taking it down and putting it back together in the museum. So on the mall in Washington, D.C., you have pictures of go ahead. There's the museum down there. It's worth the day you take to go through the African American Museum. You can keep going so we can get back. And that's the Jones Sims house that had a second story. Again, that's right around the corner. That's congruent with the Rosenwald School, which is the beauty spot. What is called the beauty spot now is the Rosenwald School. Go ahead, keep going. There it is. That's the beauty spot. And it's a Rosenwald School. Julius Rosenwald, he established those schools, 5,000 of them, 250 in Montgomery County, and in the state of Maryland. Go ahead. And there he is, our hero. But he knew that education was the key to freedom. This man understood that, regardless of how run down some of the schools were and so forth, he knew. He knew that what education, how important it was. You can keep going, keep going, keep going. And there's Pastor Chuck right there. That's Martinsburg. He's going to talk about Martinsburg, so we can fly right through that. And there's Big Woods. There's Big Woods, So keep going. I'm not going to elaborate on Mount Ephraim because no one lives in those communities anymore. But it did exist. Keep going. And there's Sugar Land. Okay, my Sugar Land, that's where I live, is the home to the Sugar Land ethnocentric project. And you have got to go up to Sugar Land. It's only about a 5.5 to 10-minute ride up Sugar Land Lane, Sugar Land Road to Sugar Land Lane, to see the church that's there. It still stands as a museum. Keep going. That's old slave quarters. You can keep going on that. And that's the well. That's the Seneca Quarry. Okay, now the Seneca Quarry is now defunct. It's not in use anymore. But if you take a good look at it, if you take a good look at that Seneca Quarry, a lot of the men from those communities, especially Sugar Land, worked at the Sugar Land Quarry. How important was the Sugar Land Quarry? It was so important, go ahead, that the bricks from the Sugar Land Quarry built the castle that's on the mall, if you can believe it. How did those bricks get down there? They went down by canal. They went down brick by brick. And so many other buildings in Washington, D.C. Were the red brick. If you can even imagine how many trips down the canal it took to build that thing. So if you've ever been on the mall and you've seen the castle down there, those men that worked at the quarry were the ones who sent those red bricks from Sugar Land down to Washington, D.C. by mule and pulling along the canal. Keep going. And there's the church. That's the church established by my great-great-grandfather, William Taylor. It's not an active church anymore. It's more or less a museum, but it sits right there. And how important is that church? Keep going. Okay, that's around 1952, and that's when it was open, and a lot of the kids were coming and going on May Day. Keep going. And then that's in the front. That's a brick thing in the front of that building. We keep rolling. I only have 10 minutes. But anyway, there's the well. That's the well that they had right there in Sugar Land. And that picture is at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And, of course, keep going. That's a picture of it. Closed today. I took that maybe a couple of years ago, but that's the same well. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. That's an award. Oh, shameless plug. All right. There's me in 1996. So
Yep, December 1996.
yeah, 1996, where the church became a National Historical Site with a plaque and everything. And the news media came and the whatnot, Howard University and so forth. And there's a lady over there who's freezing. And it was a cold day, but it's a National Historical Site now, thanks to the heroics of Gwen Reese and her project. Keep going, keep going. And that was a day, 1996. It says that the men who were given the deed, William Taylor and so forth. But anyway, keep going, keep going. Hey, and it was the site of the first interracial wedding.
I didn't know that.
Was in that little tiny church.
In Sugar Land.
And that was 1968 or whatever, and I'm glad they went through that. Yeah, but anyway, paved the way. Come on, just keep going. Okay, look, here's another one. This is another one. They decided in the movie Philomena, if you decide you're going to get a DVD or DVR or whatever, and see the movie Philomena, they picked that tiny little church in Sugar Land to be a part of the movie. Mm-hmm. It was part of the movie, and it's supposed to be a church in Europe or whatnot like that. But anyway, they thought that of the historical value of that little church. So yeah, you got to go see it. But anyway, the movie was starred by Judi Dench, and it's a pretty good movie. But when you see the church scene, say, hey, I know that church. Poolesville, you know. But anyway, keep going. And there's the cast and crew. There's Judi Dench right there, and there's Gwen right there, and some other people from Poolesville. And when they were filming it way back in 2012. But keep going, keep rolling. And there's a picture from Randy Davis's newspaper, and he's done several articles on the Sugar Land's proud history and reflection on that. Keep rolling, keep rolling, keep rolling, keep rolling. Okay, and there's Sweet Taste of Liberty, and there's another shameless plug with me and my son there, and my family up above. There's my grandmother and great-grandmother whose grave is one of the first in the row of graves in Sugar Land. That's Letha Mason. But anyway, that's her and her 12 kids or whatever that there was. But anyway, I think Randy and I discussed how the name came about, and he said something about the women were sweet as sugar. So anyway, keep rolling, please. And that's my great grandmother who died in 1958. She was 90-some years old. But anyway, her gravestone is one of the first ones on the first row if you visit that site. Keep rolling. Keep rolling. There's that picture again. Randy has it in his newspaper, and it's a pretty neat picture because someone who's standing down there is still alive today, one of the small children. Keep rolling. Keep rolling. And there's my Confederate cousin, Basil Dawson, who became a Confederate soldier. He was a member of the congregation at Sugar Land. He was a member of the congregation of his family, and he decided he was going to go to the Confederacy because they paid more money. But okay, this is in my backyard almost, maybe about 100 yards into the woods. There's the last standing piece of the house that my great-grandmother lived in. Only the chimney is left. But as you can see, red stone. The red stone, same as the castle. Keep rolling, keep rolling, keep rolling. And there's another shameless plug. That's me standing there in front of it. It's kind of because of water and whatnot near the stream nearby. It's kind of faded out, but that's the red sandstone that they built the house with.
You know when she built the house?
When they built it, I'm not sure. But I know that my mother, who would be 100 this year, when she was talking to me, she said she hated to go to the house because there was no electricity, no running water, and whatnot. But anyway, I'm sure she built it probably before the turn of the century. Anyway, that's my grandfather. That's my grandfather, who probably, I would say, he's the first person to throw me a baseball because he loved baseball so much. But anyway, that's my grandfather. There he is, 1960. And both my grandmother and grandmother's grandfather and grandmother's family both were from Sugar Land. You can keep rolling, and that's it. That's my grandmother. And keep going, rolling, keep rolling. And that's the beautiful sign that was hand painted by one of my neighbors. I think that's it, unless I have another shameless plug of myself. That's a book that is no longer published. Link Hoing's dad published that book many years ago, Ray Hoing, and that book was priceless. It's absolutely priceless, and it no longer in publications. I think I may have a couple of copies. I think that some of you probably have seen that book, but at any rate, it talks about Poolesville pretty extensively, and also the black communities. Is that it? That's it.
Thank you.
Lord, he said 10 minutes. Did I go over? Did I go over?
Somehow I can keep Skip under control, but I can't keep Chuck under control. You'll see that later.
That's why I'm laughing.
Oh, my God.
So Troy, you're next up.
Hello, everyone. I'm Troy Gardner. I'm a one-time resident of Sugar Land. Pretty much, I'm going to let you know a little bit about life in Sugar Land, from what I was told and from what I grew up in. The house that I lived in, I think Skip showed a picture of, was bought by my grandmother from the owner of the farm that she worked on. Down Sugar Land Road on the other half, which a lot of us called the white half. The white half when I was growing up. And from there, she bought it for like $600. And it was it once was a school in Sugar Land. So she bought it for $600. And basically, my mom and my aunt, maybe my other aunt, actually grew up. Her other children were born in D.C. and grew up in there. Now, the Sugar Land Lane is where you will find many of the black families where they lived at. My babysitter was, we called her Miss Lee, and Mr. Lee, Tillman Lee, who was a sharecropper. And further down the road, you had other families, the Hebrons and the Masons, I knew were down that way. And pretty much, life in Sugar Land, my mom told me that when she was growing up, they had to walk up to the church at the picture of that world that you see, get the water, and bring it on down. From there, she pretty much grew up not complaining, basically, if you don't have it, you don't miss it. That's how they kind of lived about it, I think they were one of the first families in the area that had a TV, so every now and then people would come over to the house to watch a little TV because they were the only one. I think they were one of the few that actually built a water pump so they can have running water into the house. My mom told me that because my grandfather was from Frederick, and mainly when they want to go to town to shop or have a good time, get a little drink on, they would head up to Frederick. So they pretty much bypassed Poolesville because at the time it was very unsafe for most black people when they went to Poolesville. Pretty much you got in, you got out. You didn't spend a lot of time in there. Then when I was born in '67, in the house was me, my brother, my mom, my dad, my aunt, which is her twin sister, her uncle, my uncle, her husband, and we all lived in the house. You know, it was that one house. I think it had like 2 bedrooms and a little living room, and we just packed it in. And then every now and then on the weekend, like once my Aunt Ellen moved out, on the weekend, my uncle George, who was like older and got remarried, his 2 sons would come in and they might spend the weekend, so they would live there too. And then when he got remarried, he had his 2 stepchildren come there, and they lived there, and pretty much we were sharing the house. Now, as I started to grow, my family moved right across the yard into a trailer. And so my uncle took over that house. We lived in the trailer. We went to Poolesville Elementary back when it was 1st through 6th grade. And then my grandfather, he became head custodian up at Poolesville High School. And all through the elementary school, like I said, there wasn't a lot of problems of race, but I could count on my hand the black teachers that I had. And I cannot, and maybe also if I drop my hands down a little, I could count the black male teachers that I had. So there wasn't a lot of black male role models besides your family that we had growing up there. There were always talk about the KKK coming mainly from like the Massachusetts area down into Poolesville, maybe just to not really cause trouble, but you always kind of looked over your shoulder. From there, like I said, my aunt Elaine, she moved down the road, had a big house, you know. That's where my parents, my dad went into the Army. They got married there. I remember that. I was like 2 years old. I remember the wedding and everything like that. Seeing him coming up the lane in this Army suit, you know, like that. Sugar Land, like I said, pretty much was always self-sufficient. There wasn't really a need to go. When Selby's had his little store before it got big, that was our grocery store. If we didn't go to Selby's, we went down to Darnestown to shop there in the Safeway, and we also stopped at Raymond Pools, you know, for seed and stuff like that, and the 3 Locks. I mean, sometimes we go fishing and stuff like that. Now then when I went to the junior high, 7th through 12th, everybody, if there was a black person there, chances are you were related to them some kind of way. You know, if you weren't related to them, they knew somebody of your family. You don't know how many times people look at my face. You're a gardener, aren't you? You're a Whedon. You know, I'm your second cousin, once removed from here and there. So that was fun. And like I said, going through Poolesville, again, I could count on my hand the black teachers that I had that were in, you say, English, math, or the sciences. Mr. Lyles, who was one of the first students to integrate the school, was my gym teacher. We had Mr. Pruitt was workshop. We had Mike Sims. He was mechanical drawing, also a football coach. Miss Davis, she was an English teacher. And I think that's about it. And I forgot who ran the auto mechanics. That was all the black teachers, and that's pretty much all I saw throughout my school year. Besides Miss Honeyman, who was the secretary, and yeah, I think that's about it. But life in Poolesville, like the students, pretty much there were always a division per se of black and white, but it was never really. There was no real friction, from what I can remember. There were only one time where it kind of got heated because there was a fight between a black kid and a white kid, and tension started to raise up, and it was almost becoming. We were getting ready to have a big all-out race fight, but luckily, my friends on the football team, me. Rennie McGackey, you might know him, McGackey. We all kind of got together at the football team and started chanting, walking through the halls, said, "United we stand." And that kind of killed it, and we didn't have any major reaction to that. But it was a good thing, and that's probably the only thing that I can really remember. As far as, it was almost like a little standard. It was funny about you saying the first marriage in Sugar Land was interracial. Here it was kind of, you could date them, but you never go to like public functions with them. So if you were a black guy dating a white girl, you could date all into the school, they don't mind. But when you went to prom or you met the family, she will always find somebody else to take. Yeah, it goes with the territory. We weren't really worried about it. My mom was one of the. I think she came up to the high school when it was the second year, maybe, when they had integration. And she was kind of quiet, but her twin sister was a fighter. So whenever she got in a fight, my mom had to jump in there too, because you back up your sister, So they fought a lot. But there were some teachers who really tried to help the black students, and there were some teachers who just didn't want them there. And my mom always said she kind of missed the black schools because a lot of our culture was lost when we started segregating. So that always got me thinking, was segregation a good idea or not? I believe it was a great idea because we got better opportunities and chances than going to the black schools at the time. And like I said, when I became like a junior and senior, Poolesville was starting to build up. They had just got the new gym, I think my sophomore year. It may have been before my freshman year, because it's hard to say, when you get older like me, the years start to flow. You don't know when what came what. We had the football team really was our standout. My junior year, we went to the state championship, and we were the only class that made it to the state championship. We lost to J.M. Bennett, who at the time, the student population considered them Class C, but really they were at Class B, so we should never have been playing them. If we didn't, we would have won. But I'm not sure about that. I missed out on getting a nice little ring and stuff like that. And I remember we went right up here for A-Hop, that was the Meadowlark Inn. Mm-hmm. So we got, the football team got a big special lunch and everything like that, so I was living the life. But like I said, Poolesville and Sugar Land, I think I was probably the last graduate from my family to come out of Sugar Land that went to Poolesville. I was a member of the Sugar Land Church. My grandmother, my grandfather, and my aunt, Corrine, and my mom got some plot ready for her. That's where she said she wanted to be at, so I might be there too. I might just get cremated to save the space. But yeah, that's how life in Sugarland was pretty much. It was like, again, if you didn't have it, you didn't miss it. So I was a happy kid. There was nothing I really missed or that I wanted because I didn't need it, like that. So that's my presentation of the life in Sugarland.
Thank you. Good job. Chuck, you're on.
I'm on. Well, my name is Chuck Copeland, Howard Charles Copeland III. Nobody knows me as that. I did not grow up here in the agriculture reserve, but my mother and on my mom's side of the family, they all did. Actually, my mom's mother's family is from the Big Woods area. But I'll be talking about Martinsburg, which just a little bit about my family, that on my grandfather's side, the Thompsons. John Wools taught me that one of the largest landowners up here, his name was Martin Thompson. If you go up to the corner of Comus Road and Peachtree Road, it still comes up on your GPS as Thompson's Corner. And if you stand on that corner and look down, you can see where they call them farms in Maryland. I call them plantations. And there's such a rich history. My mother, really, God rest her soul, my mom passed in June, but she gave me she planted a seed in me to get to the truth of history. And I know a lot of the people in the agriculture reserve, there's still a lot of descendants of slaveholders out here on these properties, and they don't really like for you to talk too much about it. Because they're embarrassed. But at the end of the day, history is history. And I just believe in telling the truth. I said to the commissioners at one point, y'all could tell me how many nose hairs John Poole has, but you don't say anything about his enslaved humans. And so I really, it's important to me to highlight it because it really wasn't as long ago as people tried to make it out to be. My family, the Thompson side came from, from what I know of, came from Martinsburg, or they've settled in Martinsburg, shall we say. And my great-grandfather, who I have a picture of here, he was born in 1812. His name is Albert Thompson. And we've been extolling the virtues of Albert Thompson for many years because I still live on the property that he owned, right? It was bought in 1877. Well, I have a deed here on my computer that I was given by a professor at UMBC, and she gave me the deed, and we found out that Albert's name was never on the property. His wife, Eliza, bought that property in 1877 for $450. If you guys want to come up later, I have the deed right here. Was her daughter's name was Alice, and another daughter's name was Mary. It was 3 women's names on that property, not Albert Thompson. And we in the 1880 census, he shows up as a widower. So my great-great-grandma Eliza must have passed away. There's one man's name on there. It was Albert's son Vincent, and he was described as an invalid. And so she put his name on the deed as well. So I guess because, if anything was to happen to him, she would, she could make sure that the kid would have somewhere to be. But it's very important to me to highlight, my family's history. And this is just one family that came from this agricultural reserve that I have. This is the home that he built here. This is the 2-story log cabin. They called them log homes. This piece here. And Albert's son, who was my mom's grandfather, he built this side. He added on because they had more kids. They needed more room. This house was standing when I was a kid, all the way until I was an adult. When I took possession of the property, we had years earlier, someone had come along and tried to set this house on fire. It was an arsonist. Poolesville Fire and Rescue, they put it out, thankfully. But, because it was sort of condemned before the deed could change to me, they even wanted us to pay, Montgomery County wanted us to pay them an easement. And my uncle didn't want to do that. So he just had one of his buddies, Mr. McGackey, tear it down, which it broke everybody's heart. That area is still there. This cedar tree that you see in there is still there. It's very big and old. If you see this garden behind that home, that was my grandfather had a garden like that my whole youth growing up. We didn't know where Lewis Orchard was. We didn't go to Lewis Orchard. They had apple trees, peach trees, and they had a whole garden with Silver Queen corn. And we would come and get what we wanted. We didn't have to go and pay for that kind of stuff in the summertime. And as I grew older, I realized that, this came from a very long legacy of people wanting to be independent and taking care of themselves. Because for so many years, a couple hundred years, they were doing this work for other people and taking care of other people. And they were getting the dregs. Now, the gentleman that built the other side of that house, the new side, it was a mail order house, I was told, from Sears and Roebuck. You could order a house from the catalog, and if you knew how to put it together, you lived there. And my mother was actually born in that home. The gentleman I just showed you, Albert Thompson, this is his son. Lot different looking, right? He had red hair and blue eyes.
What?
Yeah, and his mother was the one that bought that property. Now you see why. Okay? They're in this ledger, and you guys can come and take a look. These are the 1860 slave records of Medley District, Montgomery County, Maryland. You look in there, you see a lot of names of African Americans in Montgomery County. Just a few. My grandfather's mother was a Beckwith from Germantown. Me and Mr. E are related because of that. Mr. Etheridge. He doesn't want to admit it, but we are.
That's not true.
That might count me in there because
Him too. See, everybody up here is related.
my uncle is a Beckwith.
Okay.
So,
Oh, God.
And the man he mentioned, Tillman Lee, is in the cemetery up there in Martinsburg. Okay? All of these towns around here were connected. And they were connected because these people were enslaved. The plaque that we put up over here for commemorating the lynching of George Washington Peck, that man, my great-grandfather, was only a couple years younger than him. So I know they knew these guys, right? They knew people around here. I got in trouble for asking my grandmother when I was a little boy because they had a smaller picture like this on the piano in the house that I live in now. And I said, "Who's that white man?" And she said, "That's not a white man, that's your great-grandfather." And I'm like 9 years old. And in my head, I'm thinking, I ain't going to say nothing to grandma, but that dude is white. Okay? This is my mother's grandfather, Otho Thompson. And he and his dad are in this book, and they were owned by a man by the name of John Lewis Trundle Jones. Y'all recognize those last names? Lewis, Trundle, Jones. This is him right here. Y'all can come up here later and take a look at it. But I found this by accident. Thank God for a guy by the name of Jimmy Poole who gave me that book. And this is what John Lewis Trundle Jones looks like. He don't look like a very nice guy. But as John Walls said, he owned 20 human beings, and he had 2 dwellings for 20 human beings. Many of the slave owners here in Maryland, they would have African Americans, they would have their slaves in the attic because it would save time. They didn't have to worry about building another building. Some of them didn't put them too close to them because they figured something bad was going to happen, while they were sleeping. But it was very important to me to show these pictures, and as was mentioned, Martinsburg was the crossroads community before Poolesville. When they came across the river, they went to Martinsburg. Martinsburg had the blacksmith in Martinsburg was my great uncle by marriage. He married this guy's sister. Her name was Susan Thompson, and her husband's name was John Peters, and John Peters was the blacksmith in Martinsburg before the Civil War. He was a landowner. There was another gentleman by the name of Nathan Naylor who was a landowner. And when they freed the enslaved Africans from these plantations around here, the black landowners would sell parts of the property to them. And Martinsburg was like an integrated community before the Civil War. And so when people came across the river, that's the first place they stopped. They had their general store out there. They had a post office. They had a blacksmith. And so I had an old white guy tell me one time, Mr. Francis Stone, he said, man, we got along up here in Martinsburg, the blacks and the whites. He said the blacks and the colored is what he said. And he said, we didn't fool around with them people down there in Poolesville. I was like, okay, so everything is not as black and white as we think it is, but, I look at this gentleman here. My great-grandfather, he had a sister who left Martinsburg and moved to Chicago and married a white guy. Okay? We thought that was a family legend. She went, married a white guy, never came back. Well, a few years back, my daughters gave me 23andMe for Christmas. There's a whole blob of white people that I'm related to in Illinois and Indiana.
Yes, cousin.
He's from there. And Link always says, Copeland, Chuck, you related to everybody. And Troy said it, I didn't even grow up here, right? I couldn't stand Poolesville from the stories I heard when I was growing up. And I didn't like it, when I came up here. Me and my cousin would stay with Grandma, and we live on Whites Ferry Road. That's where it was. And, a car would come by every, 5 hours. But she would not let us ride our bikes or anything. All we could do was hang out, help them in the garden, and climb trees, right? But I have 3 daughters that graduated from Poolesville High School. I used to work there. I planted a church here, and I always ask, Lord, why did you do this to me? I didn't want, but this area here, I love with all my heart. And this is why it's important to me to make sure that people understand that there's a rich history. Miss Gwen, that was in charge of the ethno-history project in Sugar Land, she told me one time, and I wish that she wouldn't have, but she told me, she said, Chucky, we have to speak for them. Because they were here, but they didn't have a voice out here. It was a lot of history in Montgomery County. There's still a lot of history in Montgomery County that hasn't been told about the African Americans. And the fact of the matter is, Maryland got its financial base off of enslaved labor. And that's a fact. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so I think that it's not good for us to try to hide from our history. Hey, there's people that still live out here. There's family names in this book right here. Y'all can take a look that you will recognize. If not from people but that could be from these streets out here that are named after a lot of them. And so it's important for me to get people to understand the full history, not the white picket fence history, but the full history of how this area was financially. Poolesville made a lot of money. This agricultural reserve made a lot of money off of the land around here. And there was no way they could have done that without having, first and foremost, slave labor. And then these groups that, when the enslaved Africans were freed, they had communities all around the town. So they still contributed. They still worked. This man here, Otho Thompson, the man that owned that family, I showed you, John Lewis Trundle Jones. He shows up on a ledger in there at 6 years old. The plantation they were owned on is right on Martinsburg Road. The house is still there. Montgomery County owns it. I got a problem with that, and they know it, okay? He could read. He had a job as a roller operator for the state road of Maryland. The only reason that he was allowed to operate a machine is because he could read and because he looked like that. If he looked like me, he would have been in a ditch. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And his children, I got pictures of two of his children. This is my Uncle Wesley. I never knew him. My grandfather's oldest brother. These pictures were taken all done at the same time. This man got away from here and went to Pittsburgh. Worked in the steel mills in Pittsburgh. I have family in Pittsburgh because of him. And my grandfather's sister, my Aunt Sue, went to Pittsburgh with him. My grandfather had another sister, my Aunt Cora, who left from right here in Martinsburg and went to New York City. We had much family move north or move down to D.C., as Mr. Etheridge knows, and Mr. Etheridge is from D.C., but his mother was from up here. They were getting the same hell out of here because it wasn't a very hospitable place to be, and the jobs that they had were considered slave jobs out here. You were, if you were a woman, you were to help. If you're a man, you're going to be a laborer on somebody's farm. Well, my great-grandfather made sure that his kids knew how to read, and none of them had slave jobs. They got out of here, and they went and had different jobs, better jobs, making more money. My mother, in 1957, when she graduated from George Washington Carver High School, she moved. When she graduated, she already had a job with the federal government, and she moved to D.C. with my great-grandfather. They didn't want to be out here, okay? It was inhospitable. This is my Uncle Jimmy, my grandfather's other son. Now, he went to Pittsburgh, but he came back. And he lived in that house I showed you guys when my mom was growing up. My mom said that he used to, when he worked, my great-grandfather got him a job on the state road. And my grandfather incidentally worked and retired from the state road 44 and a half years. So he made sure that his sons got better jobs, that they weren't going to be, that they had aspirations to do better. Because, at some point, I guess all of these Africans that were enslaved, they knew that they had the ability to do better than they were doing. They understood that they were smarter than people were giving them credit for. And so, but they didn't have a way to they didn't have an avenue to put that into practice. But in due season, time came where they were able to do that. And I always say this is just one snippet of history here. In this case, this is just my grandfather's family. It's not my mom's mother's family, who's from Big Woods, who has unbelievable, they had farms, they had land. Sugar Land and Big Woods had the most land up here. Mm-hmm. Martinsburg was one of the first communities that was established. And they had, up at their height, it was 70 homesteads there. So people wanted to have their independence. They wanted to be in their own community, and they were. And like Troy said, like my mom, I listened to the stories they used to tell about growing up in Martinsburg, and they were happy. In that community up there, they were okay. They knew that if they came down here, for instance, my grandmother, my mom's mother, and I remember my cousin and I would come up here, and I would always wonder why we had to ride so far to go to the grocery store. She never went to Selby's. She would not go to Selby's. And there was a reason for that. Now, me and Lynn Selby are friends. I love Lynn Selby. I visited him in the hospital. I prayed for him. I love him. When my grandfather died, Selby's sent about 20 bags of groceries to our front door, and put them there. So as I stated before, the history of the Agricultural Reserve is not as black and white as everybody tries to make it, but there's a lot of hidden history that needs to be told, and a lot of it hasn't been told because there's a lot of families up here of former slave owners that don't want to, feel bad. Well, how do you think I feel when I go out here and look at Mosby's name on the street, or Wooten, who was a huge slave owner, Fisher, who was a huge slave owner? It's all around us. Elijah White, I live on Whites Ferry Road. Okay? So it's not about being punitive or making people feel bad. It's about making people aware of really what's around them, right around them, and the importance of educating not just ourselves but our young people about the history of Montgomery County. I went to Cashel Elementary School. I just found out 2 years ago that Mr. Cashel was a slaveholder. I went to Magruder High School. I just found out Colonel Zadok Magruder was a slaveholder. I went to Cashel Elementary School in the 70s, right? And we did a short unit on the Civil War, and that's where I really began to, as a kid, I really began to have an interest in history. And I'll never forget how, as a kid, and I thought about it as a grown man, I was taught to sing the song Dixie at Cashel Elementary School in Montgomery County in the 70s. I wish I was in the land of cotton, old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland, where I was born in early on one Sunday morning, look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. I'm 58 years old. I still remember the words of that song. And when I was a little kid, you couldn't tell me. I was so proud I knew the words, right? And then I grew up and said, what the hell? In the land of cotton, right? Right here in Montgomery County. That's why Maryland doesn't call, we're the free state. We weren't free, okay? They don't call them plantations, they call them farms. I had to correct the lady from UMBC, the professor that Link talked about. I said, stop calling them farms. If I work somewhere, if I'm enslaved, if he owns me, and I wake up every day, and I gotta work from sun up to sundown with no pay, that ain't no farm. Not for me. It's a plantation. Now, Virginia, I give them credit. They call them plantations. They ain't got no problem with it. But Maryland has this special thing about them where they're kind of like, oh, yeah, we had slaves. I had one of my friends, a good friend of mine, whose family owned humans. And he said, but I always thought they adored them. I said, adored them? If they adore them, set them free. And I say all that to say, I think it's extremely important for us to, now, I don't want kids growing up like I had to grow up in pretty much all white neighborhood. My parents moved from D.C. to Montgomery County in the early 70s. And they always said, I told Ed Reed, him and I have the exact same experience. You ask your parents, why did we move from D.C.? Because going back to visit was cool when you were a kid. D.C. was unbelievable. It was a small city, but it was awesome. Mr. E can tell you more because he grew up there. But long story short, we would ask our parents, why did we move back to Maryland? And they said, we left after the riots. I heard that from a lot of people. After the riots, after Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, bad things happened. And, they wanted to move us back to Montgomery County. Neighborhoods were destroyed for years. And they wanted to move back to Montgomery County to, I guess get a better education, be in a better neighborhood. So I always say we moved from Chocolate City to the vanilla suburbs, and it was hard growing up. Even then in Montgomery County, it was a lot. But I'm so grateful for the experience because now I'm able to walk into any room and not feel like I'm the other. I don't care what people think about me, okay? My parents taught me the old James Brown song, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Black is beautiful. That's what I grew up with. And so it's important to me to continue to keep the legacy of those who can't speak for themselves alive. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity. I think I have talked way past my time. And Link already told y'all I was going to do that. But I appreciate everybody being here. I appreciate the opportunity to do this for the first time. This is an amazing deal, and I really, really am grateful. I'm gonna tell you, and I've said it before. I love the Agriculture Reserve. I love it. I've been up here for over 30 years. I always tell people I'm not from Poolesville, but I've been here longer than I've been anywhere else. So I gotta tell them, I guess I am from Poolesville now. And so it's just a blessing for me. My church is planted here, and we're committed to the community transformation. I want to help these guys do whatever they need to do to make our town and this agricultural reserve better. We have a lot of things that a lot of things that Montgomery County does not do for us up here, and we're working together to try to change that. So I love my town. I'm not, my sister calls me Malcolm X, but I like to tell the truth, man. And when I hear things that are not true, especially as it relates to history, I feel very passionate about making sure that the truth is known. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. I think Ed wants to make a few closing remarks, but I did want to make one point here, and that is that all of you mentioned Poolesville High School and education, and we have today with us to do, and I'm very proud of the relationship we have with our schools. We have great schools that are very much a part of our community, and Mark Carruthers, our high school principal, is here today, and I thank him for coming. And with regard to that in history, one other point, you should all take a look on YouTube and look up 10 Days in September. It's a really interesting documentary about the integration of Poolesville High School, done by a Poolesville High School student. It's really informative, really worth taking a look at, and gives you a better perspective on what happened in the 1950s here. So, Ed, did you, John? Well, it's 2 o'clock. If people want to stay for a few more minutes for a couple questions, that would be okay, or if you just want to talk to these guys. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, right there.
Oh, he's going to sit down.
Is it on?
It's on, but manage the time.
Okay, so this goes for Skip.
Oh, no.
We're talking about the Seneca stone cutters. Well, deep in the woods, there's the stonecutter cemetery. You're aware of that, right?
Yes.
All right, and
Have you been back? It's a mess.
yeah, there's at least 100 graves there. Okay, and then this is for Link. One thing you didn't mention was that in the Medley district, there were over 100 Union soldiers that fought during the Civil War, and they were from the freed enslaved. Skip, you sort of glossed over Mount Ephraim. There's still a log cabin there that was owned by a free black.
At a limited time.
There's also a church and a school.
Chuck, here's a tidbit for you. So in the late 1930s and into the 40s, the Redskins marching band, one of the songs they played was Dixie.
Yeah.
And then this is for everybody. During the Sino Canal days, before the Civil War, the canal boatmen would keep their eyes peeled as they're going through Montgomery County because they're looking for the Montgomery merchants. Well, who are the Montgomery merchants? Those are the enslaved men would come down from the farms to sell stuff from the farm to the boatmen. Anyway, so they were the Montgomery merchants.
Interesting.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. And
And that's all I have to say.
I should mention that John Wolse is one of our incredible local historians. Randy Davis is another great historian in the area. Maureen is here, O'Connor. She's with the Historic Medley District. So all these people, we have a great base of people that do a lot of historic research and do try to make sure we understand what our community was about and where it's going in the future. So I really praise all of them for the work they've done.
One more important point.
Okay.
I brought this up to Chuck before we started, but before the Civil War, the people who chose to run away from their captivity, some of them made it to Philadelphia, and they would show up at the home of William Still. Anybody, you've heard of him, because I just told you about him. William Still, he helped the runaways get to Canada, so they would stop at his house. So even from this area, there's stories about how they showed up at his front door. And when they would show up at his front door, he'd say to them, "I've been expecting you." Well, why would he say that? Because the newspapers had very vivid descriptions of the people who escaped. So here's a picture of William Still. So yeah, he's famous.
And Poolesville in general was a hotbed for the Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad, as it was depicted as just a group of safe houses, like John said. And they knew these safe houses. And if you look at any map, you would see that the river runs, the Potomac River is an important key piece in getting
They use the C&O Canal
the C&O Canal.
to get up to the Catoctin Mountains to head north.
Yeah.
There's another story, but
And there's a cave on the property that I'm on, where the slaves were hidden. So yeah, it was part of the Underground Railroad. So it's a group of safe. I didn't know about Still, but they all knew exactly where to go when they left the plantations. So it's pretty neat, I thought.
And before we close, we will see if there's anyone in the audience. I'll make some closing remarks, but before I do that, if there's anyone in the audience that has a question for one of our panelists or something they would like to share. Just go to that mic because it's being
I
recorded.
was just curious if you all video recorded your stories at all.
It's on YouTube.
No, besides the YouTube, but have you sat down with anyone and recorded your family's story?
No.
Okay.
We will. Sometime, before.
She says she's gonna take care of that.
You should. These are powerful.
My grandfather just turned 102 in January, so he's still vital, and he talks to everybody, and he tells stories.
Sounds like we got a project then.
Yeah.
Ariana, she also runs a nonprofit called Story Tapestries.
That'd be good.
One of the things I also want to do is recognize Monique Ashton. She's mayor of Rockville. And so, Monique, you stand for a second? All right. Did you have a comment or question?
First of all, I wanted to thank you all for having this. It's amazing that we still have so many firsts, but it's a good time as any. So thank you all for planning this first Black History Month celebration. I serve with Commissioner Reed on the Maryland Municipal League Montgomery chapter, and I appreciate all the work of the full commission. It is a time where we feel like celebrating Black history feels like a protest, right? It shouldn't be that way. It is American history. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank you all for coming forward with your stories. We are not victims. We are strong. We have been here before. And the more you tell your stories of your families and what they did and how much they did in spite of, I think it's inspiring to all of us. And so thank you for telling your story as part of this line. There's a lot of communities, as you have on this map here in Montgomery County, who have done great things, and it really makes us a better community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so it is hard for me to sit down because I prefer to stand up, but I will follow suit and sit down for just a minute. Yeah, I'll do that. So one of the things we wanted to do is do something that helps bring the community together. And thank you, panelists, for sharing your stories and being able to have an unfiltered version, right, of your stories, because there's a lot of us who never knew your stories. And we move forward just on what we know. And so in order to have an accurate narrative, it's great to have people who have family or through your lived experience or the lived experience of your family members as stories are passed down from one generation to the next generation. And so as we look at where do we go from here? Where do we go when we get this information, we got this knowledge, this background information that brought us to this very point in history, is if you look at Poolesville and what makes Poolesville a special place, or what makes Poolesville and the surrounding area a special place, is that people are able to come together despite their differences, despite their stereotypes, regardless of the fear of how they would be received. And even when I first ran for commissioner, when I was asked the first time, I said, I don't know about that. I said, in Poolesville? I said, I don't know about that. And then I had someone who pressured me and said, well, Ed, what do you mean? And I said, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be all in. And so I was all in I won. I was one of the people who were elected the first go around. And I remember walking over, looking at those pictures up there. And I never thought about it when I was running for commissioner. And I said, man, where are the brothers or the sisters? And I said, oh, I might be the first black person to hold that position. But I'm only able to hold that position by standing on the shoulders of those who came before me. And not only did I stand on those shoulders, but I also stand on the shoulders of those who believe in something greater than an individual, but those who all believe in a community where people of all different backgrounds, all different religions, all different sexual orientations can come together and make community. And so while right now we hear DEI under attack, but just to be clear and set the record straight, diversity is making sure we recognize people who have talent, people who are capable, but might be different than one another, might be different than a mainstream. All right, and we think about equity. Equity is making sure that we have people are treated in a way that's equitable, making sure that there's equity amongst people. And then when we look at inclusion, we're looking at people from all different backgrounds, whether it's people with disabilities, whether it's veterans with disabilities, whether it's not just a racial piece, but inclusion is how do we make sure those who are typically left out of the mainstream who are included with opportunities. And so we continue to fight, we continue to move forward, because if you're going to have a community, people have to come together. You have to stand on truth, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not, in order to create a new history, to create a new reality, because we're all in the same boat. And whether you're in the front of the boat, the middle of the boat, or the back of the boat, if the boat sinks, we all are going down. And so even my hesitation for looking at, do I go and share in Poolesville, hey, we got this event, and then I have to dig deeper and say, yes, you push forward. And I want to credit my fellow commissioner, Sarah, because when Sarah asked Ed, well, is there anything happening for Black History Month in Poolesville? I said, no, I've been looking to see if anyone's going to do something. And I said, well, I guess I'll do something. And so we quickly put together an event. And I wasn't sure how many people were going to show up today, and I'm very grateful for you all to come in today. We have a full house. Even more people showed up here than what we have at our commissioners meeting. So thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. And so as we close out today, and as you look around this room, now I'm also at church with Chuck Copeland, and so I'm on that ministerial team. But one of the things we say at Hosanna Community Church, we're talking about is where love comes first. Greg, I'm going to pick on you. Greg is also one of our members of Hosanna Community Church. But we take a lot of pride, that's right, Chuck calls mixed nuts. All right? But what you have, and I'll go back to the strength of Poolesville. The strength of Poolesville is the residents who come together. They speak up. You notice John came in, hey, I got something to say. That's what makes Poolesville grass. Like, what in the world is John about to say? But John added some value to the conversation. Look here at Randy Davis. And I was really inspired by one of the articles he had where he looked at the Clark family and the contributions that Tina Clark and her grandfather had made and how it impacted education for African Americans, not just in Poolesville, but in Montgomery County. But there's stories that go untold until people have the courage to tell the story. So I want to encourage you to have the courage to share the stories that you've heard today. And if we get it right in Poolesville, we can continue to be an example for other small towns throughout the country, because Lord knows there are towns throughout the country to need to see and do what we're doing here in Poolesville. So thank you for coming out. Go ahead. I'm gonna give this one comment, and then when we're done, feel free, you go ahead, Maureen, go up to, you,
I can just stand here.
all right,
I just have
go ahead.
a few comments to say that, first of all.
But if you go to the mic, the people watching the video will be able to hear you.
I don't know if you can hear me any better here, but
On YouTube they can.
You're part of the live studio audience, and so, there you go, grab a seat and go ahead and say what you gotta say.
the main thing I wanted to say was to thank you, Chuck, Troy, and Skip, for this wonderful job that you today. You were so well-spoken and talking about the history of your family. I think that means so much. And last year, Historic Medley District celebrated their 50th anniversary. Now, I mean, that's not 150 years, but it's still, I think, when it was a couple years ago also, there were a number of people in the town, and I didn't even know most of them. They said, Mrs. O'Connell, when are you going to change the name of the John Poole House? I said, why do I want to do that? He was a slave owner. And I think one of the things I said at our anniversary dinner last year, and this is very important to me as being, when someone said, Maureen, are you still president of HMD? I said, yes, because no one else wants the job. No one else wants to do it. But I think what I kept saying is, it's so important for us, and you just showed us here today. We can't forget our history. The history is most important. We're a small little town, but we're not just a little town off 270. We're a very historic town. And to have all of you speak here today, it was just fantastic. So thank you again for all you have shown us today and made so important. We can't forget our history.
Thank you. And so in closing, really closing, is that you got a chance to witness firsthand how we all work together. And I want to say a special thank you to Link Hoeing. Link has been a true champion. This is my second term as commissioner. In my first term, Link is someone that I would look up to. Link is someone that would help me check my thinking and provide me with the history of Poolesville. He's a former commissioner of Poolesville. He's the president of our Fair Access Committee, and you notice a lot of the great things that we're able to enjoy in Poolesville. Link has been that leading voice, that champion who's constantly out fighting. And then if you go and you listen and take away when Skip was talking about the book that Link's father wrote, so it's not something that has just come up, but this is a lifestyle that Link has, and then looking at people working together in Poolesville, despite the challenges, the ugly side, there's also a beautiful side, and we get a chance to witness that and be a part of that today. And so thank you for coming out. Feel free to come and look at Chuck's book and his pictures, or ask the panelists any questions. All right, you all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Oh, bless you. Give me just a second.
you too, sir.
Hey, Chuck, when you here, bud?
Oh, okay. Good to see you, man.